Hello and welcome to Leduc, Alberta, and the quarterfinals of the Curling Stadium Alberta Curling Series men's major event. My name is Matthew Hall, and alongside me in the broadcast booth tonight, once again, is two-time Scotties champion Chelsea Carey. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, Matthew. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you? Do you have time to go grab some dinner in our short break off?
I did. I had a little bit of dinner, did a little bit of unpacking. It was good.
Oh, perfect. You just get home from your event then, eh?
Sadly, yes, I would have liked to have been playing in the playoffs today, but that's not what happened. So, early drive home and hanging out with you, and I mean that's a decent consolation prize, so I'll take it.
Well, if you wanted a consolation prize, I think this one's pretty good. We got a pretty good matchup coming here in the quarterfinals. We have undefeated John Epping this tournament facing off against formerly an Ontario rival in Tanner Horgan, although Tanner has now made the move back to Northern Ontario. I think we're in for a real treat this match. Epping sort of started off a little rusty in his first two events, failed to qualify in either of them, but here something seems to click. They're undefeated 3-0. They had a nice break coming in through the A side, and they come up against a fairly hot team Horgan here, who also started off 2-0 before dropping two qualifier games, but they rallied back with wins against Clybrink and Clyder to meet them here in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, it should be a really good game. We're looking at a sort of a new team Epping, but sort of a bit of a revival team Epping in a way, with the sort of re-addition of Pat Jansen and Matt Cam moving back to third. We've seen that lineup before, so yeah, they've come in hot. I know I lost a mixed doubles final to John in Leduc, so he likes this club and this ice apparently. And yeah, Team Horgan coming in, losing I think an A and a B straight qualifier, and then winning two straight today on the seaside to get themselves in here. So hopefully fatigue not a huge issue. Although we do notice that Jake Horgan is not out there right now, and I think we were covering a different game, but I think he missed the last part of the last game as well. So I'm not sure what's happening there, but I will say an early you're welcome to Team Horgan for making Cullen sweep on both sides for mixed doubles. So they should be they should be okay. But yeah, we'll see if we have any more information on that. I'm not sure that we do at this moment, but should be a great matchup regardless. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I do remember seeing Jake, at least at the start of the broadcast. We were doing a different game, but I did see him out there, and then all of a sudden I checked back by the fifth, sixth end, and he was gone. So hopefully it's nothing too serious. Maybe just not feeling well, a bit under the weather. But if we get any information, we'll let you guys know. But we could pick up play here in the second end. It was a blank in the first end, and we apologize. We had some technical difficulties to deal with. But looking at these two teams, you already mentioned the Epping team, and they've added Scott Chadwick as well at lead. He moves over from he was playing with Tanner Horgan last year, actually. And before then, you may know him. He played with Scott McDonald. He went to the Briar. So certainly plenty of experience and maybe a bit of a revenge game here facing off against his former skip.
Absolutely. You always want to beat the people that you played with before, and it's one of those things, whether it's contentious or not, the breakup, it's just one of those things. There's always like a little bit of a star on the calendar when you play your former teammates. So definitely looking for that in this game, but two really great teams regardless. So should be a good matchup. We've got not a lot of offense going in the second end, but there's a couple guards up there, so we might see something here. Collins swinging around to make this curl. It looks like the same thing that we saw in the C qualifiers, where it's pretty straight if you get out wide, outside in. They've thrown that twice, and both times Colin's been trying to carve it, and he's pretty good at doing that, and it hasn't worked. They've nosed it. So not a lot of curl there. So this will give John Epping a chance to go around this corner guard potentially.
And the Tanner Horgan squad is backed up, as you mentioned, lead Colin Hodgson, second Jake Horgan, who we are not seeing tonight, and the third, Darren Molding, and I think it's fair to say it's great to see Darren back on a team after getting separated from the Botcher squad in the middle of last season. He joined Grattan, made his way back to the Briar, and I'm sure it made a lot of fans of his happy to see him get back and be on a very solid squad here. And I know this is a team that he's excited to do big things with.
Absolutely. And I mean, selfishly for me, Darren and Colin are both good friends of mine. So happy to see them playing together. And I think that this team has a lot of great chemistry, before they even got on the ice. So looking forward to seeing what they can do. It'll be really interesting to see Darren in the host calling the game and Tanner throwing fourth. I don't think that either of them have ever really done that way. But yeah, lots of potential and lots of good learning opportunities, I think, for both of the Horgan brothers, and for Darren and Colin, excited to play together, and just a lot of positive vibes. So excited to see what this team can come up with.
And we see as Darren makes a very nice hit and roll there. Looks like it got mostly buried. So John is still going to be able to take a run at it. Longtime vice for John, Matt Cam, now throwing. And we talked a little bit about this last game as well. They've been together for a long time. Matt, when he aged out of juniors, got the call from John and has moved there, and they've really been inseparable ever since.
Yeah, it seems like a really good dynamic. They had a little bit of a change the last couple of years with Ryan Fry coming in and throwing third rocks, and playing third for John, and Matt moving down to second. But back now to their original lineup, and I think they're probably both pretty happy about it. It seems like the two of them have a really good kind of vibe, and I think they're pretty close. So that's always a nice thing when you kind of go back home, as it were, and have that person come back. So probably both of them pretty excited to be back together and playing back end together. And then, like I say, like I mentioned before, Pat Jensen having played with John before as well. So lots of familiar. It's a new team, but it's kind of not in a lot of ways.
And we do see him just touch off that guard and unfortunately rolls through, isn't able to keep at least the shooter around for Tanner to worry about. So looks like a pretty good setup here to maybe get some pressure on, possible steal here in the second end, you think, if he can get this guard up?
Yeah, for sure, an opportunity for that. It looks like the back rock right now is a good chunk open. It's a little bit hard to tell from, uh, yeah, like half open probably. So
I
looking to
think
put a
so, yeah.
guard on here, you could get away with an over curl, because you just need to cover that center line side so that it's not accessible. But yeah, a good opportunity for some pressure here. If you're a Tanner Horgan, you don't mind a force, but a steal in an even end really changes the game quite a bit. So um, good chance here to potentially get away with, not having the hammer at the start of this game. You could turn it around pretty quick.
And, it's interesting thinking about John Epping, of course, having a great tournament, comes through undefeated, but it's always that age old question a little bit when you come through that A side, especially in these triple knockout tournaments. A lot of times you end up with almost a whole day, sometimes like a day and a half off. And while this other team, I'm sure uh, this Horgan team has played a lot more games. This is their seventh game as I look at it this weekend. So eventually you'd think fatigue will set in at some point, but it's always that age old question of whether you want to have that rest or you just want to be more familiar with the ice. They've played more games now. They just came off a seaside win, so they're feeling a little hot. I never really minded the seaside grind as much, albeit I was a skip for most of my junior career. So I'm sure my sweepers might have a different aspect there. But how about you? Did you prefer one over the other, or what's your perspective on that?
I think if you got to choose, you'd qualify probably B,
Hmm.
like a little bit of an in between situation. I think C is quite a grind. So then, like you said, fatigue becomes a factor, especially for the sweepers. But A is tough. Like having a whole day off is tough. And it's early in the season. It's different if it's late and your body needs the rest and things. And like, look, I'm old, my body needs the rest all the time. That's fine. But it can be a disadvantage for sure to have the extra time because the ice often changes and the rocks are getting buffed out a little bit. the whole thing maybe is a little straighter. It's just if you play more games, you're more dialed into the current conditions and you're making shots and you're kind of on a roll. Where on the A side you were on a roll a day and a half ago, but
Hmm.
now where are you? So it's for sure not wouldn't be my first choice other than you're in the playoffs and the rest is nice. But for your chances of winning the event, I'm not sure I would choose A side.
Yeah, and we're seeing here maybe a little bit of that rush showing both times, not quite able to get by that guard, and now leaves a great opportunity for Tanner to toss up that guard again and force John into a really tough shot. And yeah, I know I've come through the A side a couple times. It's always difficult to find ways to fill that time. You want to stay focused on the event and sort of stay in the zone as much as you can. But when you have like a whole 30, 24, 36 hours off, sometimes teams will go golfing, or if they're in Toronto or something, they might go watch a sporting event, that kind of thing. And you need that nice break off, but you also still need to stay focused on what you want to do, which is win this event. And here, John's going to have to be really focused. Looks like he's trying a long run back double here for hopefully the blank.
Yeah, run for the blank. I think there's no real like if there was an easy shot for one, I think he'd probably play it, but there isn't. So you
Hmm.
may as well try to get a blank out of it because that's the best result. Not an easy shot in the sense that you're running the opponent's rock back, but looks like pretty close to a nose hit.
Well, here we go. We'll see. Final stone here in the second end for John Epping, looking to remove this yellow rock off the button and walk away with his blank. Gets one, but just drives it by in the one in the ring. So great start, I think, if you're Team Tanner Horgan. If you're John, gonna have to bounce back quickly here. After two ends of play, it's a 1-0 lead for Tanner, and John Epping will have the hammer in the third end when we come back after these commercials. And welcome back to Leduc, Alberta. We pick up play here in the third end. Tanner Horgan coming away with a steal after a couple just not they weren't far off John Epping's team on those misses, but maybe just missing the wrong way. A couple of those times they ended up just touching the guard. You would have liked to at least move the guards right out of the way, or keep a shooter around somewhere, but they just seemed to keep losing what they were trying to go for and ended up being forced into a tough shot, and Horgan walks away with a steal that end. As we see here, setting up, we do see Darren Molding in the rings calling the game. Tanner Horgan does throw the fourth stones for this team, or third stones, I should say. They are playing as three tonight.
Yeah, and that was an interesting series of events as well, because that can be a tricky thing to get right, to get figured out. The dynamic between the person calling, like when you're throwing skip rocks, it's easier when you do it yourself because you have a vision for how the end's going to go and what you're going to have to throw on your last rock. It can be tough to have somebody else with having that vision and you're just trying to execute it. But we've also seen it work very well for a number of teams. So I know Colin's former team with Reed Carruthers and Mike McEwen tried it and it didn't work extremely
Hmm.
well. And they're back now trying it again. And I think in this case, the dynamic might work quite well with Darren and Colin being, I hate to call Colin a veteran because he's younger than me, but with them being the veterans and Tanner and Jake being, new into the men's game and still young and learning and everything. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I theoretically it makes sense to me to have it be this way. So we'll see what happens.
And I think it's also good. I mean, it's no secret Darren has had his share of physical issues or injuries in the past as well. I specifically remember his back being an issue a couple seasons ago when he was playing mixed doubles with, I think it was Joanne Courtney at the time, but I might have that wrong. So not bad to also keep him in the rings and keep the young guys up front on those brooms.
Yeah, for sure. That's part of it, I would think. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but yeah, it's easier for Darren if he doesn't have to sweep, obviously, to kind of deal with the physical aspect of it. And these I hate to say it and I say it to my own teammates, like you can't complain about playing 3 games in a day. Like when I was 22, I didn't worry about that. So these guys in theory are in a good position to do that. So we'll see how it goes. But it logically seems like a good plan in a number of ways.
So looks like maybe a couple miscues here. That guard maybe slipping in a little bit deeper than they would have liked. If they wanted the second center guard up, I'm sure they would have liked a little bit more distance so that they don't end up leaving this nice little double. Looks like they might be able to get all the yellows moving. They might lose one of their shooters if they try and do that. So maybe trying to hit this a little bit thicker, get rid of the guards and roll to another corner.
Yeah, it looks a little thin right now. Yeah, I do think it was probably possible to get all of them moving. I don't know if you could have killed them all, but you certainly could have sent it back in there and made some things move around. Not the result that they were looking for, but not terrible. You're probably going to see Team Horgan throw another guard here, I would think. The challenge being that shot rock, is only not even half in the 8 foot. So at some point, you're going to see John Epping throw a draw around this whole mess. And then if you don't make a freeze, you're going to give him two. So got to be a little bit careful here, but I think I'd throw a guard for now.
I agree. And these are it's always just a little bit of a cat and mouse game, right? Where John's going to go around eventually. So if you're Tanner, you'd love to maybe beat him by that one shot and be the first one in, but I do agree it's probably a little bit early to try it now. If you try and go in too early, with how well these guys can hit, you're just giving them too many opportunities to try and get stuff moving. And you're always sort of guessing when are they going to make their move and when should we make ours. But maybe, once again, maybe just slipping a little bit deep here. Second opportunity for Pat Jansen to try to make this double peel.
Yeah, it's I don't want to jinx him, but it's fairly hard to miss now. And at anywhere high side, they both go, and you might even get the one in the house, although I'm not sure you. No, you probably won't. A
Does
little
get
bit
both.
too thin, but not
Yeah.
bad.
Does move that yellow, I think, far enough off center. It's maybe in the way of the draw to the 4 foot, which is probably one of your concerns. But for the moment, it probably does what you were hoping for it to do.
I agree, but you have no draw to the 4 foot right now
Hmm.
because the red guard's blocking your out turn draw. Now the yellow guard's blocking your in turn draw. It looks like Tanner's talking about splitting this. I actually think I would do the opposite. He has no draw to the 4 foot right now. I think I'd be throwing a guard on this personally.
Yeah, because anything you going to the rings. One of the things that's kind of okay for John is because that rock is so high, as you said, he doesn't necessarily have to throw the draw to the 4 foot. He could throw like the draw to the side of the 8 or side of the 4 and still score his point that way. I I agree. I would be a little bit hesitant about moving the stuff in the rings, and this is ends up being a lot
A
of weight
little,
pushes
yeah, a
it
little heavy.
almost through.
But
Nope,
even
it
like,
sucks around.
I'm not sure. I don't love that call. I think I like it's to me. It's you don't need to do that yet. He's going to continue to peel your guard still because he needs to. He's probably going to try to make a double peel of some kind, and maybe that's why they didn't do it because you leave him a double peel. But now he's got the 4 foot, and he wouldn't have. Like
Yeah,
we've got both sides blocked. So I don't know. For me, I think I would have waited a little longer to have gone into the house there.
I agree. If you wait an extra shot or two, then you make a good tap. Or I wasn't sure about the split. Maybe you eventually think about trying to tap and cutting down the rings quite a bit more. But
I agree, straight back on the nose. But I think that's like Skip's first rock.
mhm.
Like this is a couple shots earlier than I think I would have done it. But that's your eventual play. You throw the guard, he peels it. If he makes a double peel, maybe you play it a little bit sooner. But I
And
mean,
so
they're
here
going
we
to end up with potentially a force. So
yeah, it's still a lot of work here to do for John. And I think if Tanner makes most of their shots to finish this end, they'll come out of it okay. But yeah, I mean, you can never really guarantee a steal at this level, regardless of the situation, but you want to try and think about keeping that high intensity or that extra pressure on the team at all times, force them into making really tough shots. Um, and then, eventually, if you get a crack out of one of them, you might get a steal. But here, Darren just missing that pretty short run back. That's one you expect him to make most of the time, I would think, and leaves
yeah,
looks like John's indicating that he is shot stone. So
yeah, it's a little bit hard to tell from our overhead view here, but I think he did tap it, so he thinks that he's shot. Yeah, tough one for Darren there. That was a pretty short run back, and Colin was sweeping it right out of his hand. So maybe just a little bit tight or a little bit soft on the release in a curly spot. Not really sure what that looked like to Tanner, but they were sweeping it right away. So I would
mm,
guess that it was something to do with the execution there. So now this turns in from an opportunity to steal or certainly force into potential opportunity for multiple points for John Epping.
absolutely. I think you do have to be a little bit careful with the rock placement here. I think without thinking, you might look at drawing around that corner and trying to keep it above the tee line. But I mean, Tanner's the same age as me. We grew up playing against each other in Ontario. I'd be very wary of that. He's a very good hitter, and if you try to put this in a better spot, top of the house, he's more than likely going to take a pretty good crack at the cross house double. So that's why I think he called to go a little bit deep here, sort of keep it in the open so Tanner can't freeze and try and get himself out of it. And I think that's a pretty good spot. I don't really see Tanner could take on the freeze, but this early in the game, I don't necessarily think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, you're already one up. I don't know that I'd freeze now. I think you got to try to kill it. And you could probably get a little bit low under this guard and make him chase you and hope he
Mhm.
misses it. And if he makes it and he gets his two, that's what's happened with Darren missing that run back. So that makes sense to me. I think this is a smart call.
Of course, these are the quarterfinals tonight, and there are three other matches going on, all being presented by Curling Stadium. You can find the feeds of the other three games on the Curling Zone YouTube page. Just a quick rundown of what we're seeing here. Team Yanagisawa out of Japan faces off against Team Carruthers, who was the team we just covered, who came out of the Seaside. And Reed starts off with a steal of 4 to start their game in the first end. So they're off to a very good start there. Other games, we have Yannick Schwaller of Switzerland facing off against Aaron Slicinski. And then we have Ryan Wiebe facing off against Marco Hosley in the fourth and final quarterfinal tonight.
Lots of good games. A big start for Team Carruthers there. We saw them play a really solid game in their C qualifier against Team Corey Dropkin, the Young Bucks from the USA. So not surprised that they're continuing to roll here. Does look like John Epping's going to chase this rock.
Yeah, Tanner was able to remove it, but didn't quite get that little flop under the guard that you were talking about. So this should be a fairly straightforward hit. I think if your nose, you're probably still deep enough that it would be a very thin double, but I would not be surprised to see Tanner take a run at it regardless.
This needs to curl for him. That's, oh, there it goes.
And I think they wanted to maybe roll that about a rock, but to make the double extremely tough, but rolls a little bit too far. It's not quite nose, a little bit on the high side to make the double here, but you should be, I think if you make it, you're close to keeping the shooter around.
It looks, I mean, we don't have an overhead right now, but it looks like you, I mean, I think it's just a hair high. So
Hmm.
your shooter should stay. I think for John Epping would have preferred to nose that, or even get a little bit low, if anything.
Hmm.
So a little bit of a miscue there. They didn't seem worried about it early, so maybe ran a little straighter than they expected, which also kind of happened to Tanner Horgan. They were trying to get a little bit of a roll underneath. So again, as an event goes on, typically you'll see the ice get a little bit straighter and straighter with every game. So maybe we're seeing a little bit of that here too. Here comes the double attempt for Tanner Horgan.
Oh, wow. Gets it over the top.
Not the call, but they'll take it.
Yeah, would have liked to stick around there and force John to the single, I'm sure, but they'll take a blank out of that situation. It was looking like a pretty clear two for John until his first stone. So
And also a smart shot management situation there from, we don't have mics on them, but from either Darren or Tanner or both, to switch the call and make it. Like you don't
mhm.
want to wait too long and then stuff that and leave John an easy shot for two. So you'll take this blank all day if you're Tanner Horgan, based on how that end went. You're pretty happy here. So smart to plan B that, to audible that, and into the double the other way.
Absolutely, and it will be a blank for John Epping. He'll carry the hammer to the fourth end of play, and after a quick commercial break, we'll meet up with you there. And welcome back. As we begin the fourth end of play here, fairly close matchup. I think we didn't really expect any less. We know these are two very strong teams. We expected to have a close matchup. Any surprise, Chelsea, that we're walking away with just 1 point in the first three ends?
Not really. I think that we see this a lot in men's curling, and it's not because they throw the first one in and then the other team hits it and they just exchange hits. It's because people make doubles and run backs and things. And we saw it wasn't necessarily plan A from Tanner Horgan there, but he made a nice double and then it left John the opportunity to blank. If he'd made the double the way he called it and stuck his shooter, then we would have seen a force there. So, no, not terribly surprised. And also with new teams, maybe tending to lean a little bit more towards the conservative side of the strategy, just keeping things a little bit more simple. And for John has had probably a full day off, I would think. I don't know that. I was trying to be good at curling in my own life, which didn't really go very well, but um, didn't haven't seen the draw or anything here. But my guess would be that they've had some time off. So not surprising that they're looking to keep it a little bit simpler. And for team Horgan coming in pretty hot, but also missing a player right now. So not necessarily looking to go crazy either with one sweeper and people throwing rocks in different positions and all kinds of things happening. All the drama, all the intrigue. We're in for a treat.
Absolutely. And it's one of the great things that I think for us at least is when you have these really close, low scoring matchups, every mistake really means that much more. You need to be really precise because with so few points being scored, every point could be the one that wins you or loses you the game. So uh, hopefully that is a sign that we're in for some good shot making here as we get close to the second half of this game.
I think we will be. And to your point, that's exactly what we saw happen with Corey Dropkin flashing a hit in the first end of the C qualifier there. And really that was the game, which
Hmm.
seems crazy. It was the first end, but it can go that way. So both teams here seem to be sort of sticking to the mantra that we don't want to give up the game early, and a deuce doesn't seem like a big deal, but it could be in a game like this. So trying to keep it played a little close to their chests here early on and see what happens. Though that being said, we do have a few rocks in play this end.
Able to just come around and remove that stone from play. And unfortunately, still remains in the hole there, but I really don't know if they could have gotten much more out of that. You needed to sort of bring the weight down to ensure that you removed or were able to get at that rock that was buried.
Yeah, I'm not sure you could have done a whole lot better, but if John Epping can roll, ideally he'd roll behind those two yellows just because of the stagger. This red guard is fairly long, and if you roll buried there, Team Horgan can probably always chase it. So if you'd roll behind the stagger, that would be ideal. Now, granted, they're not your rocks, and you'll leave a run back opportunity, but I think that's what I would be trying if I were them, although they weren't sweeping it for that, so maybe not.
They almost slightly rolled in under the yellows, though they probably could have been a bit more aggressive with it. Definitely a hole there, although it's sort of angled in the wrong direction, so that sort of artificially makes it a bit tighter to work through with the intern, but it should be accessible from what we've been seeing. They certainly think it is. They're going to take a crack at this.
Yeah, based on what we saw earlier, if you were playing in the event that we were just in Edmonton, this shot's impossible because it curled way more than it needed to for you to make this. But for them, I think this is makeable. And even if you clipped your own yellow and you open up that red rock, at least it makes them think about it. There's some decent misses here. I think this is what I would be playing if I were them. Colin
And
swinging around and trying to keep it straight. This will be interesting to watch actually with only 3 of them. You'll get to see a little bit of what the sweeping strategy is and when you're sweeping to curl versus straight because you only have one guy. So Colin will swing around based on what they're trying to do with the rock, and then he'll also be in a different position if he's sweeping for speed versus line. So we might get to see some interesting things with I mean, it's unfortunate for them, but it might be fun for us to watch what happens because I see him do this at doubles, so I might have a little bit of insight into what he's trying to do.
you could see some visible frustration there from the Horgan team. Looked like that rock might have grabbed or picked up something while it was coming down because I expect them to be a lot closer than that. But they do touch the guard, but roll into the 8 foot. Now, I'm not sure if that really does all that much for them. There's still plenty of room for John to hide around some guards somewhere and make Tanner's life difficult. But if Tanner is able to sort of remove the red stones, that yellow now behind the guard could be your force rock.
It's making them think though, like look at Team Epping right now. They're in theory you loop another one around here, but then if Team Horgan makes a run double, which they very easily could if you come around that center guard, then now you're forced potentially. So it looks like they're looking at a double peel maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't know if they're throwing a whole lot of weight, if this is more just
It's
so
like a
just a
tap of
raised into the
some kind.
rings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you hit this about 2/3 and push yourself behind that Yellowstone, you at least roll out of the way, and now that yellow is still accessible. That is really good. That's an excellent shot.
That's a very aggressive call. That's really precise to make that, but they made it perfect. So good on them.
Yeah, and they didn't have to. I mean, they could have just drawn there. It was
Well, but
accessible
he
enough that
also
they
opened
really
up but he went by doing that,
right.
he's now opened up his intern draw path, right? So
Hmm.
it's brilliant. I think I would hesitate to call it because it's like you could miss that a lot of ways that are bad for you. But
Yeah.
I mean, he made it perfect, so it's hard to argue with.
So Darren's
My
now
dad
being
always said
asked.
there's no such thing as a wrong shot if you make it. So here
Yeah.
comes Darren with his run back. And he's right.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, just misses that. Really close to being great, but unfortunately for Team Horgan, not great.
And now John's gonna have to take the time here, figure out what he wants to do. I mean, you're probably hitting this Yellowstone and rolling behind if you can. The only
Yeah, you're leaving a
that's
double
where
misfit
you'd
shot though is the challenge,
yeah.
right? That's a pretty routine double on the two reds right now. And you'll sit behind that yellow guard, at least partially behind it, shot stone. If I were him, I might try to roll in front of this first yellow to take that away, or first, sorry, that center line red rock to take that away, the side button one. Like just roll over somewhere near the center line and try to take away their double.
Matt Cam's first rock here in the fourth end does make that hit, rolls towards the center line, as you said. Now, likely that leaves a nose double for the Horgan team, or they could take on the same double if they would like.
I'm a little surprised they didn't sweep that roll more. Like to me, if he rolls that a little bit more, it's perfect. You might leave him a triple, but if he makes this double and sits there, I guess you just freeze to it. It's not terrible,
Mhm.
but Horgan will be shot rock and buried. So if I think if it were me, I would have tried to take that away.
And you'll still be in a good position if you're John. Still looking good to at least get your two, but you're right. I think leaving them this for them makes things slightly easier, and he does make the double. I think spins up a
Oh,
little
might
bit
have
too
spun a little
far.
bit too much. You wanted a little bit of spin there. If in a perfect world, that spins about a rock less, half a rock less. So you're still shot, but you're more buried. So really close to good, but not great as it turns out. So now I'm going to try to loop this around, and now you potentially bring a 3 into play here for John Epping.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like, if that spins, as you said, a rock less, it's really good. But by going that little bit extra, not only is it not shot anymore, but it's also now your enemy. Because if
Backing,
John
yeah.
makes this freeze really good, it's going to be very difficult to remove.
He doesn't even need to be frozen to it. Like just in front of it on the right
Hmm.
angle, and you can't get there. So really close to it's like good from far, but far from good. Is that the expression? Something like that. That's
Yeah.
what they just experienced. Like really close to being great, but you had to miss that on the thin side, not the thick side. And unfortunately for Team Horgan, they missed it on the thick side. Now this didn't bury at all.
Hmm.
So opportunity for Tanner Horgan here to hit and roll, probably ideally behind that red rock, because then if he runs it back, his shooter won't outcount this wide yellow. So roll it in there and hope that that you get a miss. And even if he makes it, I mean, if you leave him a chase, he'll play it. But if you don't, you're in pretty good shape.
Well, a bit surprised too. It's I mean, just how far it missed by. Obviously, the weight was almost perfect. It was pretty close, but that undercurled by like close to a foot. And
Yep.
like I've
Well, at
played
least a
against
foot,
Matt
yeah.
Cam enough to tell you he's not missing the broom by a foot. So
I
I
played a mixed doubles game with him in at the Continental Cup, and I agree with you. Like,
yeah.
he's a bit of a laser at the broom. So I'm so that must have just surprised them, because and they didn't
Mhm.
seem worried about it. They weren't saying lots of room early. They didn't look like they were carving it early. It just seemed to straighten out. So maybe a straight rock, or maybe just the spot getting a bit straighter on them. But I agree with you. I'm very surprised that that wasn't closer.
And then another one there, they kind of the Horgan team got caught on that hit and roll. Like watching their faces as it was coming down, it didn't really seem like they were close. Like they needed it to curl, and then all of a sudden make the hit and the roll, and nobody's sweeping it, and it ends up maybe a touch buried or edge on edge, but definitely had the opportunity to get that a little bit further and make things really tough here for John.
Yeah, they could have for sure. It's always a challenge with the ice changing as an event goes on, right? So we talked a little
Hmm.
bit in the earlier game about papering rocks and about ice getting straighter and all those things, and we're maybe seeing a little bit of that. The sheet shape can change a bit. We talk a lot as players about sheet shape, as far as, is it a little bit dished, which means it curls towards the middle and not towards the wings? Is it there's sometimes it's sort of a W, like the center line's a little bit high and the sides are the 12 foot's a little bit high, but the 8 foot's a little low, so it'll curl to a point, then it'll stop. There's lots of those conversations going on. And for Team Horgan, having just come off playing 2 games earlier today, you would think they would be pretty dialed into that. But it does look like both teams are getting a little bit fooled right now by some little idiosyncrasies that are happening on the sheet.
So it looks like the decision here for John was to try and hit and roll basically back to where the rock was. It's going to be pretty tough to roll somewhere where there isn't some kind of slash double for the Horgan team, but I guess ideally you want to roll this as far as possible while still sitting two.
Yeah, I think they would have liked to roll that further, because then if you take on the slash double, you could jam it on your own yellow. Right now,
Hmm.
that's you'd have to miss it by quite a bit to jam it on your own. So you'll see Tanner take this on, and just it's like I call it, when I go down to my front end when I throw a shot like this, I say we're going to take a cautious run at this double, which means you
Hmm.
can't hit it too thin, because that's the only way you can hurt yourself. So if you end up nosing it and you give him two, I mean, that's the way this end has gone, but it's very makeable. So as
Hmm.
long as he doesn't hit this thin, they're pretty happy. And he has a pretty good chance to make it without having to take on a lot of risk.
So final shot here for Tanner Horgan in the fourth end. Once again, the opportunity to make a double and sort of save himself a little bit. Hits one, hits the second, and it will just spin out. That's benefit of being able to throw it that hard, I
I was
guess.
just gonna say that that jams for most players. That stays in the house for most players. He threw that really hard, and that's the only reason that that red didn't stay in the house, because that he hit that onto that pretty thick. They would have liked to. Cullen was curling that the whole way down the sheet. He was trying to get it to curl, and gets away with it because he threw it that hard.
And they took a decent look at it, but even if it did stick around, there's really nothing there. You can't access that yellow shot stone that's buried. So John's now resigned. He's in the hack of throwing his final rock here in the fourth end, and it's a draw any piece of the 8 foot for 1 point.
And the good news for John here, is that you're scoring in the even end. So as much as he would have liked to, obviously, you're getting your single points in a pretty low risk situation, and being tied isn't your favorite situation right now. But you've gotten the hammer back. If you've scored, it's tied. Like it's pretty good when you have the hammer in the even ends, which he now does. So if you can get a force here, you don't want to let them blank the next end in theory, but it's not a bad situation.
All right, so single point for John Epping. They tie up the game, and we'll see you at the start of the fifth end. And we are back as we resume play here in the fifth end, starting the back end of this quarterfinal matchup between Ontario's John Epping and Northern Ontario's Tanner Horgan. We just saw Epping. He was forced after a great high weight double by Tanner Horgan on his last rock, forced John Epping to draw the 8-foot for his single point. I was taking a look just for my own notes here. There is live betting on this game that I found. Most books had this match open up at about a 57% chance for John Epping, which I think just goes to show how closely matched up these two teams are, especially with John being guaranteed the hammer coming out of the A side. But I just took a quick look there, and at the half, it's now pretty significant edge towards Tanner Horgan, about 67, so about 2/3% chance that they're saying that he has to win this game. Would you agree with that assessment, Chelsea?
Yeah, I think the scoreboard the way it is, and being in an odd end now, I mean, I think that's probably max
Hmm.
for the odds, but I don't mind it. I if I were to set them myself, not that I am that good a bettor or odds maker, that's your arena, Matthew, but I don't disagree. I think that it's looking if I were to pick the winner right now, I would say that it's Horgan.
Yeah, I just think that advantage, especially as we get later and later in this game, and these teams showing already that they have the ability to limit scoring. It's really going to come down to who can control the hammer. And right now, albeit it is an odd end, so it's maybe a bit less effective, but right now that's Tanner Horgan who holds it. And maybe even a bigger opportunity now after Pat Jansen just wrecks on that guard, leaves Team Horgan shot two, one more or less buried behind the corner guard, and maybe an opportunity to find somewhere to put a third point.
Yeah, for sure. What does the double jam on the side, do you think?
It's very close. I mean,
You could probably make
I
it so that it doesn't, but you might lose your
right.
shooter backwards into the 8 foot if you did that to hit it thin enough to
Yeah,
get it over the top of that.
I don't think you can make the double sort of like hit that second one high to push the yellow underneath the red, but you could
I think it's always
probably
going into it. I think if you hit it
yeah.
really thin, you might be able to, but I think your shooter spills backwards.
Hmm.
towards like back 8, back 12, which isn't necessarily helpful.
So I think the call here is pretty much, you don't need to be too aggressive with it, but the idea here would be to corner freeze this red out in the wing. Although the sweeper's
They don't
not in
like it.
love with it.
They don't like it. It's got to sit.
Just sat down in time, albeit I think for fourth
It's
shot.
probably fourth, but not what you and now it might actually queue up the triple if you could get this. I'm still not sure this side yellow behind the corner guard goes over the top of the red, but possibly.
Well, we'll see here. Pat Jansen throwing his second stone.
It's not far off from getting all three.
Yeah, trying to clean up the mess a little bit here. Big weight from the kid down the center line, gets one. And not enough to make the double, but don't look now. That red is mostly buried. Should be accessible, but we've seen it's been a little bit straighter today, so this will be a little bit of a trickier shot for Tanner to get at.
The guard's fairly long is the only saving grace I think here for Darren. It's it's definitely straighter and it won't be easy to get there, but because the guard is as long as it is, if you look at the overhead shot, you can see how like in the straight on view of the sheet, it doesn't look like it's as long as it actually is. Look at where that logo is in relation to the hog line. That's not far over the hog line. So it has 15, 20 feet to curl past the guard. So you could maybe get there. But I think based on how today has gone, it's still not an easy shot.
So first rock here for Darren Molding. Colin staying close. They seem to like it. Now switching over to try and get a little bit extra curl around that guard. Makes contact. Will it push it far enough?
Did that touch the yellow?
It's difficult to say. It might have. That red was slightly higher. I think it was able to get underneath, but
we didn't have the overhead. If it did touch it, I don't think it would have gone that far on that angle. So probably not. So great shot. I mean, as good as he could have done, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I don't think they pushed it out far enough to outcount that back yellow, but I mean, I think it's pretty long ask to be able to bring that into play regardless.
Yeah,
So,
any more weight, I'm not sure it would have curled that much. Although they did, like Colin was trying to carve it, so it didn't get by the guard by very much. But I think on ice it's a little bit straighter, and this is just my personal opinion, that the carve doesn't do as much. So if you're trying to sweep it to get past the guard, you've already killed the finish. So you can't really throw it that way. You have to throw it to get by and then hope you can carve it. And I think that's what they did. And whatever my inside scoop is worth, Colin is an excellent carver, although that's not his good side for it. But he's exceptional at it. He's one of the best, in my opinion, in the game. Certainly pound for pound. So for him to get it to there, I think, I'm not sure you could have done a whole lot better. And now, can you save? I'm not sure you can save the shooter if you make this, but it's close.
to make the double?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, maybe if we saw the overhead, it would be possible to. It's tough to see because that other red over there on the side,
Could
like,
you maybe
are
make the
you ever
triple?
close to
Yeah,
jamming?
that's
Yeah.
what I was wondering is like you could maybe make the triple onto this one on the side and then get the other two, and then that sticks your shooter because it's there. They gave up on that one fairly early, so a little bit wide. I think we hit that a little bit thicker. It might have been possible, but hard to say.
Yeah, it was pretty close because he sort of just rolled under that red on the other side, and the other red just missed
Just missed
the
the side.
double.
Yeah,
So it was pretty close.
I think it might have been there. And I think they were trying it, but just a little bit straighter. They didn't seem to hit it early. Colin was cleaning it, and then they kind of gave up on it, like they were hitting it too thin before it even got to the hog line. So just not as much finish as maybe they were seeing early in the week, because it seems to be surprising them a little bit.
I will ask, since we're watching him, are there any plans to keep Colin around, coaching your women's team that if you guys make the Scotties again this year?
We haven't talked about it, but certainly possible. I mean, we're playing out of Manitoba now, so getting there is going to be a challenge. But
Mhm.
yeah, he was great. We really liked having him around, and I mean,
And
I knew I would. He's one of my best friends and my teammate in mixed doubles and everything else. But the girls all seem to respond really well to him too. So certainly will be a conversation that we have, but hard for him as well because it's more time away and everything. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely not opposed. So don't be surprised if that's what happens.
and I'm sure the charcuterie is just a big plus too.
Yeah, well, so imagine if we would have had like if we weren't sort of faux bubbled, which is essentially what we were.
Yeah.
Um, and we could have actually gotten him like a cooktop and stuff. He would have just made us every meal. It would have been amazing. Like, why wouldn't you want a chef to be your coach slash whatever
Hmm.
and things?
And
If only he could have matched the rocks, then we would have been good to go.
so do you get I'm curious, do you get the charcuterie on the mixed doubles, or is that only when he's not playing and he just gets to watch?
Oh no, on mixed doubles, I get no things. Like love the guy to death, and he sweeps all the rocks, so I get that part. But
Yeah.
I get no special treatment when we play mixed doubles. No, it's straight up just like we usually don't eat. We don't eat breakfast. We like maybe have lunch. There's not a lot of food involved, and there's certainly no charcuterie. So that's a coach Haji thing versus like a teammate Haji thing. So
All
definitely
right.
not.
I'll keep that in mind if I ever decide to come back to competitive side and need a coach.
Mhm.
I'll put my application in. They looked really good.
I do highly recommend the charcuterie, and he also got a sushi for the last day, which like the food at the fifth
Ah.
end break was out of control good. So definitely recommend that.
Well, some interesting developments as we watch this end here playing out. Some missed opportunities by the Horgan squad. Of course, they missed that double or possibly triple we were looking at before, but then not able to make the double on Darren's last one there left an opportunity for John to make a hit and set three, I think, but jams it. And now the chance right back. I think Horgan's second shot. So this might be it's a little tricky to remove and stick around somewhere because you're rolling to the inside and there's the chance of a jam on either one of those stones, but certainly an opportunity back here.
Well, I think the challenge is that the only way to make it might be to make the double. You maybe could punch it through
Yeah.
that hole. Like on the overhead, it doesn't look like you could, but on the straight on view, it looks like maybe you could. Just like a hair low, like 7/8 low, might go through the hole. But yeah, really, really tricky for Tanner Horgan here. It's possible. You could get to a number of ways, but you got to be really careful. The good news is if you get low at all, then you should get one, which is important, obviously, at this point in time. Or be sitting one.
Do you ever play this with this ice? It's difficult to see how much weight he's throwing. Do you ever throw it with maybe like just a hack? I know you're out so far that you're probably not sure what it's doing, but like just maybe a bit of a safer shot to try and play for that hole.
Well, but the hack makes it easier to jam.
Hmm.
I mean, that's not a great result, but I think I would have played it with normal to firm
Hmm.
and tried to either make the double or if it curls, then like if you stuff it there and could stick your shooter. I think you could with a normal-ish sort of weight. That was probably Peel. He threw that pretty hard. Um, I don't know. That's just a hard shot.
Yeah, and I don't know, that might just be my personal preference. Whenever I was looking at those shots that you really had to be that little bit precise, extra bit of precise to try and hit something like through a tight hole or whatever it may be, it was always sort of my preference. I ended up bringing the weight down, but it's whoever's throwing the stone and whatever they feel the most comfortable with. I know Tanner's always felt strong with those with the up weight hits, so
I think it's also a little bit of the spot and the sweepers. Um, like it in a perfect world, I agree with you. But if the spot curls, then I don't want to bring the weight down because then it brings in a whole new thing, which again is a little bit of the difference between men's and women's curling, but is also just a little bit of a something that's in your head. Like you're out way out wide, You don't know if it's fresh. You don't. I don't know. I think that that maybe factors in a bit here as well. But it at the end of the day, like you said, it boils down, I think, to personal preference. So it looks like we're going to see Tanner throw the draw for the single point.
Yep. Last rock here in the fifth end needs any piece of the white, the 8 foot, to score his 1 point and keep control of this game with the lead. As we come back after this next commercial break, we'll do a quick update on the other quarterfinals, but there's some interesting developments going on there. This rock, though, Colin seems to like it, not overworking himself, and he'll just follow it right down onto the lid. So a great draw there for Tanner Horgan. Scores his 1 point. They take a 2-1 lead. John Epping will have the hammer when we come back in the sixth end. And welcome back to Leduc, Alberta. We pick up play here in the sixth end of the quarterfinals. We are watching the Curling Stadium Alberta Curling Series men's major in this all Ontario matchup between John Epping and Team Tanner Horgan. Missed opportunities and going both ways, I think, in that last end. It was looking really good for the Horgan squad after about second stones, but just sort of lost the thread a little bit, missed a couple shots the wrong way, and John made them pay. They still had the opportunities going into skip stones, but just couldn't convert the chance to get there too. So they take a 1-point lead here, and with it's a bit more of a toss-up this game now. Of course, Horgan with the 1-point lead, but with 3 ends to go, you'd imagine John has 2 hammers to 1, and he's going to try and utilize one of them here in this end and hopefully score 2.
For sure. And for Team Horgan, looking pretty hard for a force or a steal here, probably wouldn't even mind a blank necessarily. Um, to get, and then you force in 7, not terrible. So it's a lot of scoreboard management in a game this low scoring. You're always keeping sort of in mind what, and it's different by different teams, but so for both of these teams, especially for Team Horgan, they don't necessarily know what their stats are yet because they haven't played yet, as far as whether they're better one up or one down, or how they are at forcing in 7 or what that looks like. So it's yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how they handle this, just because it's such a tight game and because they're both relatively new lineups with different teams, even though John Eppings, I would suggest, is pretty familiar to him.
Yeah, and I was just looking at the numbers as you were saying that, and in general, between top men's teams in this, the it tends to skew to the team with the lead in this scenario. So that would be Team Horgan, about 60-40. But because it's so early in the season, and the fact that both of these teams are new and still sort of getting used to each other, I think this probably skews a lot closer to a 50-50 cut.
So here's my question. What does it skew to, one up and one down in men's? Because I know what it is in women's, but I don't know what it is in men's coming home. So
Coming home,
what is it?
it's
Yeah,
like with one end left, it's usually it's about 60-40 um to be up one
to the
without.
team with the lead. Okay.
Yeah. But I think, it depends a lot on what teams you're talking about. So that's sort of looking at like the numbers I have here are all the games between top 25 men's teams in the world. Um but there's certain, teams out there, and I've seen specific stats on certain teams where they are just happen to be much better down one with.
Oh, a thousand
Um
percent. And that's for sure a thing. I just was curious because I like I say I know what the women's numbers skew harder to the team that's one up than the men's
mm,
do, but I wasn't sure what the men's looked like. Like in the women's game, you want to be one up. You're always it's a better your odds are significantly better. But I wasn't
mm,
sure what the odds were for the men. So that's interesting. And it does definitely depend on the team. Like some teams are just good at getting two coming home. Some teams are good at stealing one. Like it's very individual. But we have the general numbers for a reason, and it's for sort of that purpose, right? Like this is maybe part of the reason why they make the decisions that they make.
right. And like how often would someone like you who's competing, at the top of the tour throughout most of the season, how often would you sit down with your team um and maybe actually like look at those numbers or discuss them? And I know there's, with any sort of advent of bringing math into sports, some people like it and some people are much more sort of feel players and sort of just talk about like what they're comfortable with. Are you a person that looks a lot into your own numbers and has those discussions with your team like halfway through the season of how you want to play out certain scenarios?
So I like numbers in general. I'm a numbers person, but the challenge is that you don't necessarily have access to those numbers unless you generate them yourself or pay for them.
Hmm.
So it can be a challenge. Like I like them. I like to use them because I think I believe in that math side of things in general. Plus I like numbers. So for me, I'm all in on that stuff. But I, like this year we don't have access to that. We don't we're not national team curling Canada where they'll provide that to you. We don't have the funds to pay for it, so it's just one of those things where you don't necessarily have access. So like I'll look back and go, okay, when we threw a guard in this end, we gave up a two, more often than not. Like I'll sort of make some loose numbers for us myself because I like that kind of stuff. But yeah, if we had access to it, I would always use it. But the reality is that a lot of teams don't have access to that.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of one of the holes right now with the development of specifically our sport. When you compare us to some of the other games that are out there, I mean, I can look on baseballreference.com, for example. I can go see like every at bat that Babe Ruth played in, or any like player back to, you know, s- God knows like how long ago. All that data is out there, and it's just sort of not as accessible in the curling scenario. I think we'll get there. I think there's
We're
people
moving
out
that
there
way for sure. Yeah, I
that are
agree.
tending in that direction, but I still think it'll be a number of years before we have such like limitless access to it as you
I
have in other sports.
totally agree. Like I want Moneyball for curling. I love that stuff, but I don't have that stuff unless I have money to pay for it, which I don't. So
Mhm.
it's just one of those things where it's a bit tricky because you want it, or some people do. Some people don't want any part of that. I personally like it, even if my team doesn't, and I don't share it with them. Like I like to know that as a skip because for me it helps like plan the strategy for those last couple ends and all that. And having the general information is great, but having the information on my own team as far as our record when we're in a certain situation helps me plan strategy. So it's really useful in my opinion. But
Mhm.
it's a matter of how you get access to it. And right now it's not readily available unless you have funding or money or both.
So taking a look at this, it's difficult to tell looking at the overhead. I think yellow is shot. Correct me if you think differently,
I
but
agree with you, but it's close, and the overhead could be throwing us a bit there. But based on that shot, it looks like it, but it's really close.
yeah, and I think, if red was still shot, you have a little bit more of a hope if you're Epping, but if yellow is shot stone sitting where it is right now, it's sort of tricky to think about how you're going to try and generate a multiple score here for John. Looks like he's going to try and maybe raise one of these guards in. You saw Pat Jansen play a very similar shot to this 2 ends ago, so I think John's a little less hesitant about playing it.
I would suggest to you that this is a shot that they have practiced because that's
Hmm.
a bizarre shot to call. It's a great make both times, and he's made it both times. But I don't think that's random. I don't think that they just now are deciding that they should play this like long angle corner tap. I think that they've practiced that, and I could be wrong. But to me, that seems like a shot that they've purposely put in their repertoire, and it's working very well. So, I mean,
Yeah, it's like
anyone watching this game should maybe take note of that. I don't know.
it's like watching a master class. Like that kind of shot is not something that I think a reasonable, like average curler, that just never doesn't even pop into your head. I think if
Oh
you gave
no,
me like 5 minutes to look at that scenario and think about like what's every shot you'd reasonably call, I don't know if I'd even consider like that raise. But once you see him call it and
and
you
make it.
start thinking about it and someone points
It's
it
a
out to you, you're like, that's actually
it's a
that's
brilliant
amazing.
call. It's a
But
shot that I would look at and be like, our chances of making that are so low that I'm not going to play it. But they've like that's why I say what I said. Like to me, that's something that they've purposely decided they're going to do. It's like Rachel Holman 2013 busting out the tick at the Scotties. Like they had
mhm,
practiced that the whole year, but nobody knew. And
mhm.
then Lisa Weagle gets MVP because she makes all these ticks, and it was incredible to watch because it screwed everybody up so badly. Like to hold something like that close to your chest and then to just bust it out is unreal. But
Yeah,
so something like that to me, and I would consider John Epping the king of the intern angle raise, um, based on several events I've watched him in. So that's what Pat just did. But I think that's a brilliant call. It's just you don't just call it if you haven't put some time into it because it's really hard to make.
yeah, and it feels like one of those things that's so niche. Like how often would you actually get the chance to call that? But he's found it twice and they've made it twice. And just looking like at that last shot there, a terrible break, I think, if you're Darren Molding, that you missed the run back, but you still had just enough to touch that yellow over off the frozen position. We talked about how good it was because it was on top of that red and shot, but now moving that out of the way, it's still a bunch of grouped rocks, and I'm sure that Horgan will be able to throw a lot of weight and get some stuff moving, but definitely gives Epping way more of an opportunity here to get his multiple points.
Well, and that's he couldn't have done that without raising the corner garden because the angles weren't there. So like it
Hmm.
it was one of those shots where like you couldn't make it even if the guard wasn't in the way or whatever. You couldn't make it just coming straight to that. But by bringing in that angle from that corner guard, you can make it. So I'm like very impressed by the call and like I say, I would I don't think that that's an accident.
So we see here, I think John would have liked to curl up a lot more on that. I think he was trying to play the tap into the yellow stone. I
I
think
agree. I agree.
you're almost happy with where that red stone ended up if you're Tanner, because like try and find a way to get that yellow out. It's certainly possible, but it's not the easiest solution. You might be able to run that back in the 12 foot, and there might be enough of a hole to push the yellow through, but you risk losing a bunch of reds if you try that.
I do think there is enough of a hole, but if you ever hit it closer to the like if you run it more straight back versus on an angle, you could kill both of those reds potentially.
Hmm.
Like if you hit that on the nose, I think both reds might go, or like a little bit on the high side, the right hand side as we look at it. Both of those reds might go. So you have to be very careful with that run, I think.
Tanner's trying to take a crack at making a double, and I think
Oh dear.
if they could have held that, think the idea was to hit that on the nose to make sure that the yellow and the forefoot jammed and you got two of the reds to go, but
He just
basically
did. Yeah,
made
he
John's
just did
shot
what I
for him.
said that Epping could do. Yeah, exactly. He made it for John Epping, unfortunately, for Tanner Horgan and team. Not a great result.
So what do you do here if you're John? You have to be careful. Like my initial shot that jumped into my head was draw as we look at the overhead, maybe draw to the right side, sort of back four, but you have to be careful that you don't leave a triple with the hitting ability of this Horgan team. I don't
My first
really
thought was
see
the intern hook, like the intern draw around the top yellow and try to
like top
just
eight.
get a
Yeah.
yeah, try to just get a piece of it buried and sit three. Because then you
Hmm.
shouldn't leave them an angle. Like you could almost even leave it wide open. I don't think there's a triple, but if you could ever tuck a piece of it, then the best he's doing is making the back double. To me, that's the call. The hit and roll actually here is really good as well, but the challenge is hit and rolls are one of the hardest shots in curling, and no one
Hmm.
seems to realize that. Like, oh, you don't want to leave him hit and roll. Well, yeah, you do, because the chances of him making it are sub 50
Yeah.
in most curling. Like the hit and roll is a really hard shot. So the result of the hit and roll is the best possible result, I think. But I think I'd be drawing there myself. You could take away both runs if you get that a little bit hooked, and then let him try to rip a double, and you still get two out of it. I don't love this. But if he makes it, it's going to be really good.
We do see it's coming down. Need to get a little bit more curl to avoid the jam. And they do. Unfortunately, didn't get to the
Yeah,
inside,
they're
so it is fourth
not third.
shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, looking at this now,
Now it depends
obviously
on how
yeah.
gutsy you want to be.
I mean, no question the double's there. Can you throw it to hold the shooter? I think you can, but you'd have to be
I think
pretty
you can.
precise with your line and weight.
Can you play it into it? I don't think you have to. I think you can play it into it versus across the face, which means to me that you can
Hmm.
definitely hold the shooter.
Yeah, I think
It's
just
like
with a nice like control weight, hit it 3/4, 2/3 high side, and
it
should be
looks.
pretty close.
We don't have an overhead right now, but it looks to me like it's 3/4 to 7/8 even. Like I think your shooter
Hmm.
stays pretty easily.
It's just been I feel like it's just been a game of uh handing opportunities back and forth, and so far at least Tanner's been able to save himself with these shots when he's been able to, but big weight coming here and ends up nosing it, maybe a little tight. A bit surprised by the weight choice there. I don't know about you, but like I feel like with that kind of weight, if you're making the double, you're always losing the shooter, and John's gonna have a hit and roll to set too. I was a bit surprised he didn't try and bring that down, like really go hard for that double, because like you said, I took a longer look. As I took a longer look at it, it just seemed easier than I initially thought.
I'm with you. I thought I like if it's me, I'm probably playing it with like a normal to a maybe firm.
Hmm.
But like what the way he just threw, I don't have in my repertoire. Like that's a lot of weight.
Hmm.
And like I can throw it relatively hard, but not that. That's full peel. So you're probably losing your shooter always if you do that. So I don't know that I necessarily although I guess it would be hard for them to make a hit and roll on the yellow, the top 12-foot yellow that doesn't leave a double.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the only way I can sort of make it make sense in my head that like you make that, you roll out, they roll somewhere, but you're probably always going to have a double. And then you make that double and then it's a blank, right?
Yeah. It's a great tool for sure, being able to throw that much weight and to do it as accurately as he can. It's incredibly useful, but you do have to, just because you can doesn't mean you always
You
should. And I
should.
think
Yeah.
here it's even more important because uh, if you try to do that again, you make the double, you lose your shooter, then it's just a nose hit for John to score
Oh yeah,
two.
no, now you can't. like I say, I think that the logic the first time was that it would leave them a double.
Hmm.
Now you have to try to make this double somehow, or figure out a different option. But you can't risk giving up 3. So not the easiest shot here for Tanner Horgan, although the broom, it's not a lot of ice, but it is fairly straight here. So my guess is that this would be more like a normal or like a solid control. We call it easy, whatever sort of terminology you use for that weight.
And there are some options here too. If you don't make the double, because it overcurls, you're pretty close to leaving a double for 3 back, but might have the option that you can roll somewhere to make it a little bit tricky. I think obviously plan A is to just make this double, but always have those sort of second options in the back of your mind where you might be able to get away with something sneaky. The way final stone here for Tanner Horgan, looking to make 2 reds go away and hopefully
Colin is
save.
sweeping this to keep it straight right now. So in theory, it's over curled, if anything. That's not terrible, actually. It leaves him a double for 3, but he can't just play it for 2 because it'll jam. Like,
Right.
it's at least edge to edge. So it's not great, but you just got to hope he doesn't make this double.
Yeah. And this is one that John's usually very close on, but of course, yeah, if he ever just misses it by that yellow, there's the jam possibility at the back to watch out for.
For sure. Like, well, yeah, you actually probably could. It's not easy to give up 2, but you could give up 2 if you cross
Yeah.
this a little bit.
Either way, big opportunity, and with how low the score has been and the way this game is going, 3. This could be the game right here if he makes this shot. Very close. Got
Sweeping it
this.
hard early for line. Close.
Oh,
Oh, it's really close. Yeah, he's gonna make it. That's a 3 ball.
amazing shot. Scott Chadwick with the sweep, just able to hold it in time. Gets that second yellow out of the rings, and John Epping walks away, the first multiple score in the game. You think this is going to swing the momentum quite a bit? He takes a 4-2 lead after 6 ends of play. When we come back, we'll start the 7th, and we'll be back with you then. Welcome back. Once again, coming to you from Leduc, Alberta. Matthew Hall alongside me is Chelsea Carey. And a big swing in the game there, especially, I mean, just in general, uh, taking a three there for a 2 point lead is huge. But I think with the way this game's played out, with how many blanks we've had and how many single scores, I think that three really jumps off the scoreboard at you.
Yeah, that is one of those things when it's great to play a game that's close and kind of hold your cards close to your chest and wait for those opportunities. Unfortunately for Team Horgan, they did that and it went in favor of Team Epping and they end up with a pretty big end there. It's not over yet, but certainly like major advantage here right now to Team Epping. So we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, usually when you get late in these games, and I'm sure you're well aware of this as a skip yourself for a long time, you start to take a look back at the scoreboard and think about, well, what's your path to victory here in this game? And now, if you're Horgan, assuming you can't get a three, which threes are hard to come by, I say, as John was able to just do that last time, but you're probably looking at a steal, or sorry, taking two here and stealing the eight, or maybe a blank, and then you take two and steal the extra. But we already talked earlier today about how hard it is to steal that last end at this high level. We're looking at about maybe that's only a 10 to 15% chance. So definitely, barring a three, it's a long road back here for Tanner Horgan to win this game.
Yeah, so my suggestion, you are the one with the numbers, but my thought would be that for sure in men's curling, you are better off to be trying to get a 3 and 8 than you
hmm
are trying to steal a point.
And so that's interesting because I've sort of thought about this a little bit as I've been commentating this weekend and last weekend. The 3 and 8 was something, obviously with the five rock rule, it's still more prevalent than it used to be before that, but I think teams have really learned how to defend well against the five rock rule. I think the first end or first year or so that it came into play, we did see that quite a bit, the opportunity for those threes to come back and win games, but I think that's sort of tended back to the norm. It's still more possible than when we used to do four rock. But what do you think? Is it still like prevalent enough that it's something that we should maybe be careful about?
Well, I just think that your chances to steal with like I think you have to assume the other team is making 2 ticks.
hmm
So how are you stealing? So at least with trying to get 3, you get your 2 corner guards. They're in theory stacking in the middle. You throw it like when
hmm
we play anyway. I don't know if men do this, but when we play, we go full 4, top 8, tight guard.
hmm
And if they don't, and then we throw another long guard if they keep going around. So then like fine, have at her. Like you go around to your corner guard all you want, but now you got to deal with our 4 rocks in the middle. I just wondered what the numbers were if they would support. To me, it seems neither is a good. I mean, let's be very clear. Your chances of winning are not good, but I would think that they're better to get a 3 than they are to steal one. With assuming 2 ticks are made, which in most curling, but certainly in men's curling, to me seems like basically a guarantee.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers right now, and at the top men's side, being down two with an end to play, you win about 10% of the time, and that's including taking three, but it also includes, taking two and stealing, which again, not uh, that likely. But when you are tied without, it's around 11%. So it honestly seems to be about the same. There's really no difference there. So
Sorry, I'm
regardless, you're not in a great situation, but it could come down to team preference.
You're definitely not. Sorry, I meant down to coming home with versus tied without coming home. Like I wasn't thinking about this end. I
Right.
was I
That's
was
that's
sort
what
of
I
like
was
this
saying.
end as well. Okay.
It's
So
about
it's
10 or
similar.
11% in both of those
Yeah,
situations.
okay. So it's yeah, it basically probably comes down to what you like at the end of the day, it might come down to how likely you think the other lead is to make a tick.
hmm
Because if you get a missed tick, then your chances to steal go up quite a bit. But if you don't, then you're probably dead. So it's just a bit of a maybe a gut feel thing, maybe like a personal team or like ice conditions or the other team or like all those things could factor into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably 10% in general, but if you're playing Lisa Weagle, it's probably like two or three. Um,
It's like 0 probably
yeah,
because she's making those ticks for fun.
yeah. We do actually have, I just saw some handshakes on one of our quarterfinals. Team Yanagasawa was able to get a single point in the fifth end, but just not enough. He shakes hands. He loses 6-2 to Reed Carruthers. So Reed Carruthers is our first semifinal qualifier. And as I pull up the draw here, he will play the winner of Marco Hosley and Ryan Weeb. Currently, Ryan Weeb with a 1-point lead without the hammer, it looks like, in the seventh end. And while we're talking about it, it looks, I'll just say on the other quarterfinal, Team Yannick Schwaller, I believe, last I checked, yeah, it was 6-2 for Schwaller in their sixth end of play against Aaron Slicinski.
Yannick Schwaller taking over Team Peter de Cruz, essentially, with one change in the lineup, but throwing third rocks and calling the game. Have had some early success this season, which is good to see. And Aaron Slicinski, actually cousin of Colin Hodgson, who we're watching here with Team Horgan. Very
Oh,
good
really?
player. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one name. I don't want to say it was a little bit of a surprise to me, but a bit of an unknown for me. Maybe out west, uh, he's a little bit well known to curlers out there, but he did actually win his first event of the season
He did.
in
Yeah.
Alberta as well. It was one of the Alberta curling series. I think it was in Edmonton, maybe. I can't remember, but he came out with basically the first win of the season. So they're off to sort of a hot roll.
Very good player. He, that whole family, it drives me crazy about Colin, but he's good at everything. He's just very athletic, as is Aaron. And Cara Drummond, who is the brother of Greg Drummond, who played with David Murdoch for years and years, is on that team as well and has played with Aaron for years. So they're underrated. They're like sneaky. They don't travel a ton, but they'll win a lot of games. So look out for Team Slicinski. I'm telling you right now. You heard it here first.
Of course, being out of Alberta, though, is no easy task. He is out of Alberta, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's no easy task. Going up against the Kevin Cooey's and the Brennan Botchers of the world at provincials every year.
Yeah. No, not great. I've lived that life, and I'm going to continue to playing out of Manitoba this year. But yeah, it's not the best. It's a challenge, but if you win, you give yourself a really good chance. So you pick your poison a little bit, right?
Oh wow, an amazing shot. As we were talking there, I kind of looked away from my screen for a minute. I looked back and suddenly Horgan's sitting two. So I had to, or maybe just sitting one. It's difficult to tell, but I had to go back and look at the replay. I was quite an impressive triple there by Darren to remove all the red rocks, and still the opportunity for John. I think he's going to try and come through this tight hole and remove the shot stone and maybe sit two. It's difficult to tell who's second shot.
Yeah, I think it looks like red to me. So if you get through this hole, then and like close to the nose, then you probably sit two. They're getting Pat to carve this now. You don't want to hit it high. Not a great result there. Opens up the opportunity here now for Team Horgan. Not a guaranteed situation at all, but you're about to sit three if you make the shot. So kind of as good as they could hope for, given how this has gone and the situation in the last end. So try to hit and roll away here and hope for a missed double or two, and you might get your two or your three. Colin sweeping this early though, so
Yeah, I mean,
thinking it's tight.
I think even if you make this, there's really no way to avoid giving up some kind of a double. But if you can take your two this end, that gets you on the path back to having a chance.
Yeah, there's lots of double opportunities. You just have to hope they're missed. This
Yeah.
might have left a triple, although I think it might come up into that red on the side anyway. So, but for Team Epping here, it doesn't really matter. You're okay giving up two because you're pretty happy being tied coming home with a hammer. So you're not worried about the triple so much. Just make sure you make a double and let Team Horgan get their deuce. And they still have more opportunities. That was still Darren throwing. So we've still got a few shots to come down here.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with the triple is if, let's say you make 2 of them go, but you don't get the third one, you probably lose your shooter, and Tanner could just split the rings and you're likely giving up a 2. They're going to take a crack at this back double first. And I think if you make it really good, it's difficult for Tanner to not roll somewhere to give you another double to get the force out of it. So he makes the 1, makes 2 of these go. And now with that stone where it is, John's pretty much always going to have some kind of slash double somewhere, you would think. And if he makes it, then it's a force, which is a much better chance. So I do agree the triple might have been there, but I think this is the easier way to play to get everything.
I agree. And they're not worried about giving up a single here. They're very happy to do that. Even 2 is fine. So I don't think you need to go crazy if you're Team Epping as far as trying to make doubles and triples and things. Like you don't need that. But for Team Horgan, you're just trying to figure out a way to at least get 2. Because if you get forced here, you're in really big trouble.
And as we were talking, we did have handshakes on another quarterfinal. Yannick Schwaller stealing 1 in the 6th end. He walks away with a 7-2 win over Aaron Slicinski. So Schwaller moves on to the semifinals. They'll play the winner of this game here that we're watching between John Epping and Tanner Horgan. I think that Schwaller team is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Already winning 1 event this year, looking quite strong here. Of course, Benoit Schwartz and Sven Mikkel, they've made a name for themselves over the years already, regardless. And Yannick was coming up through the ranks, and so with Peter stepping away, he moves in to take over a very strong team.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be the team to watch out for as far as they'll be the top team in Switzerland for sure. And you've got Nicholas, and you've got obviously Canada and a number of other top teams, but they're definitely the new team to cruise, and that you have to watch out for them. They'll be a factor in a lot of events.
And speaking of Swiss teams as well, as I look over, as we watch a bit of a miscue there by Tanner pushes his stone through the rings. There's another Swiss team on the ice, Marco Hostley, and this is a guy who also has sort of snuck his way into the top conversations in men's in general, I think, but especially on the Swiss side. Marco, I had the pleasure, I played against him in my World Championship final, and they're a very strong young team out of Switzerland, definitely with Schwaller and Peter de Cruz sort of teaming up. He has sort of secured himself as the heir apparent maybe to that Swiss throne.
Yeah, I think Switzerland's a very interesting situation because we've seen it on the women's side a lot. Like they've produced so many top teams that I don't think I would ever count out a team from Switzerland. Ooh, I don't think that was quite what they had in mind. John Epping, I think, trying to hit that closer to the nose, and a little bit of a like come across the face situation there, and just a little too much and rolled out. And
Well, I think actually maybe got really lucky to keep
well,
that
I
stone
think
at
he
the
got
top.
very lucky.
Yeah,
Yeah, like it worked
because
out pretty good. But
if that rolls out, I think Tanner might take a long look at trying to double off those reds and walk away with the blank rather than getting forced. But as is, he is forced to a single point here. Just needs basically full house anywhere, but he is drawing against 3.
yeah, I like his chances of making this, but I don't love his chances of winning the game, even after he makes this. So
No.
that's going to be the challenge. But you hope for some misses. But step one is to make this draw because the game's over if you don't. So
So final stone here in the 7th end. Tanner Horgan needing full house to score his single point. Colin giving it a nice clean. Looks like he doesn't hate it.
Like to see that.
And he'll come right
Almost
onto the
perfect.
face of the rings, grabs a piece of the button, scores his single point, but finds himself with his back against the wall now. Only one multi-score of the game, but it's the deciding factor so far. John Epping will take a 4-3 lead with the hammer into the last end of play. Quick commercial break, and we'll see you once the 8th end begins. And we are back here for the 8th and likely final end of play here in this game. John Epping with a large advantage with a point in hand and the hammer. Looks like they were trying to play a tick there, but just ends up slipping by. So maybe a bit of an advantage back towards the Horgan team. They will elect to attempt to throw up a second center guard here. And if you're, I mean, we already talked about how difficult it is to steal one end, let alone doing it 2 in a row, but that's the most likely way that Tanner Horgan will come back to win this game. And it's off to a good start. If you can get 2 center guards up and hopefully avoid a tick by the other team, then it's sort of game on, and still plenty of opportunity to make double peels, but then you have that little bit of a glimmer of hope with that first one slipping through.
Oh, they snuck it by. I would like to once again extend to Team Horgan the opportunity to thank me for Colin getting up and sweeping his own rocks. It's insane, like what he does when we play doubles, and what I mean. It looks like they have two sweepers, but they don't. It's the thrower who's jumping up to sweep, and he's incredible at that. So they got a pretty good situation here out of what looked like a bit of a dicey one. So I mean, you never know. I
I'm sure
expected
you
it to
can
look a lot worse.
I'm sure you can expect a nice gift basket at your door when you guys go out to New Brunswick in a couple weeks.
I mean, only if the rest of them value me more than he does, but we'll see. No, I'm kidding. I love him, but yeah.
So we are here. This is not playoff Sunday, or I guess it is sort of. These are the playoffs. Usually you think about the finals being on Sunday, but in this event, they will be semifinals and finals will run tomorrow. I don't know about you, Chelsea, but today is also basically a impromptu holiday for me. It's the first day of football starting.
I'm with you. Who's your team?
Well, I'm afraid to say I think I'm gonna be made fun of, but might have to go with Detroit Lions.
Uh,
It's been a tough number of years, but
they've had a couple of decent ones in there.
yeah. But yeah, 1 o'clock today. I woke up extra early this morning, started working around 6 a.m. because I wanted to get everything done in time. 1 o'clock, I was planted on my couch with the game on, and by 1:20, I was napping, as as usually
That's
goes
fair. Yeah.
for me. So
Football Sunday. I mean, that makes sense.
yeah, but I swear I caught every play.
Obviously.
So not quite getting that rock to where they would have liked. Still shot stone in the 8 foot, but I'm sure they would have liked to get it a bit deeper, cut down the rings a little bit for John. John electing just to take an easy crack at the peel, ends up just getting one of them. And I think right now, if you're Tanner, you just kind of guard for as long as you can, right? And then maybe you have the opportunity to come down, play a tap, or try and just sink one into the 4 foot on
Yeah.
Tanner's first, maybe.
I think in a perfect world, you're throwing the in-turn draw and just sinking it in there. So I think for now you just throw guards and try not to line up an easy double peel or something because like they're gonna try any multiple peel situation they have here. But they yeah, I think in the best case scenario for Team Horgan here is to oh, this looks heavy a little bit. Uh-oh. Unfortunately, here gonna set up a fairly easy double peel, I think. They're not happy with that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe one of the good things about it is if John makes the double peel over the top, it's pretty close to going back towards that red, although honestly, even that's probably not good. You probably want that red later to try and draw around, so
Yeah, I don't think sadly I don't think there's much good news here for Team Horgan. There's no matter what happens here, it would be hard for it's possible, but it would be hard for it to be worse than it is right now.
Pat Jansen being tasked with getting these stones to go. It looks like they're not actually going for the double peel, just getting rid of this tighter rock, which is probably the safe, probably the right call. I mean, that higher guard is a little bit too far off the center that you're probably not worried about that stone all that much if you're John. So get rid of the rock. That's the actual bigger problem, which is the tighter one.
I agree.
And what's good about it is exposes. If you think about what Tanner's going to have to do here, he's probably going to continue to try and get a tighter guard in place, but to do so, he'll be drawing around that yellow rock and keeping things away from the center line. If John ever had to, that red will always be exposed for some kind of a raise or a slash. I'm sure he'd like the opportunity to get everything moving and just give himself an open draw to win this game, but always nice to have a few options available to you.
Well, the nice thing is he's not throwing against the loss. Then, in theory, he's only
Hmm.
throwing it against one. So, worst case is an extra end, like not the end of the world. But yeah, for sure, you're looking at that red rock staying open is helpful to you because you can use it later.
This stone just slipping into the rings. It's difficult to tell. It looks like it's pretty much buried. Might be a little bit exposed, but I mean, even if you make that much of a play on it, you have to think about where your shooter's going to roll to. And to make a play, you're probably not throwing a lot of weight. You might leave something around near the top of the rings. You don't want to stagger the two red stones up there.
Yeah, I thought he would have run up there to peel this guard. To me, that
Yeah.
makes the most sense. And if you catch the red on the way by, you might get lucky and fire that back into the yellow. But even if you kill your own red, I think it's still the best case scenario. You're going to
Well, you know,
make
it might
Team
might have
Horgan throw
taken them a
more
little
guards.
bit longer to figure it out, but they got there, Chelsea. Don't worry.
It can look different from there. I've watched my own games back and been like, this is a very obvious call.
Yeah,
But
they do make the single peel. And looking at the situation that we have right now, trying to play this out. So yellow's sitting shot 1. You could try and sink around I think ideally, maybe the best outcome you can do is eventually sink around the red one and try and force John to play the run back and have to stick it for the win. That's
yeah,
probably the toughest shot you can force him into.
I agree.
Problem is, you just have to continue guarding for a little bit and hope he doesn't take away that opportunity for you.
You have to make him waste a few, and I think you might have to throw it on John's first because I'm not sure or sorry, on Tanner's first because I'm not sure John will peel again. But I think for now, this is what they have to do because he's gonna keep peeling it.
As you said, would love to. I think even if, as long as you don't dead jam it onto the red, even if you just remove the red entirely and get everything off the center line, that's probably still better for John. Then he's never forced to anything tougher than just a straight draw.
Even if you jammed it, as long as you don't roll it to the top of the button, it's still pretty good. Like you could
Yeah.
dead jam it there. It's not even full 8. Like if you dead jam it onto
Mhm.
that, you still got a really makeable draw. The only thing you don't want to do is roll it into but even then it's only top 4. I think it's worth the risk to run it into that red, but as long as you make the peel, like you don't have to take risks right now if
Right.
you're team epping.
So having discussions about where to place the stone, you seem to allude that this might be where you'd think about coming in now.
I think you have to.
Because if you
I
don't,
don't think he's peeling again. I'm not sure he's
yeah,
peeling again, so I think you have to now.
yeah, I think if you just guard, John's probably playing that little slash, opening up things on the center, and I mean, if
Or
he
he's
makes it good, the sits shot, or at least then he'd have an open draw.
or he's playing the draw. If he makes the draw
That
right
too, yeah.
now, the game's over, right? So
Hmm.
I think that if I were him, I would probably not peel and I'd probably play the draw and try to make it decent. And even if you don't, you've still got potentially a yellow double. You like there's still lots of options or the little slash or whatever. So I don't know. I think you have to go around it now and hope he misses whatever he's throwing and then
Hmm.
throw a guard and hope for the best. Like you're in a bit of a desperate situation here if you're Team Horgan. So
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're not winning without a miss.
well, yeah, exactly.
Probably on John's last,
Exactly.
so
Yeah. You have to hope he misses. So sink this draw, hope he misses a run back, and then put up a guard or go top 8 or whatever, and then hope he misses a double. Like that's
yeah.
really your only hope, I think.
Regardless, John should always have a shot to win here with his last one. You just want to try and make it as difficult as possible. So going with the intern draw here. We've seen this has been a little bit straighter tonight, so getting around these rocks top 12, maybe not as easy as it was earlier in the weekend. This one's out there, definitely needs to start curling soon, but looks close.
Here comes Colin on the carve. He's pretty good. It's really curling. It's gonna be pretty good.
Slips just behind the pinhole. I don't know if that really changes anything for John.
I don't think it matters. I think you just needed to get that buried because
Yeah.
I mean, if he plays the freeze, you're okay with that because you
Hmm.
hopefully he doesn't make it and you've got a chance. If I'm John, I don't think I'm freezing. So you play some sort of rip, some sort of peel, and then for Tanner Horgan, you throw a tight guard or like a top 8 or whatever, and you hope he misses a double. Like you need misses here.
Yep.
But if you go, so he makes this rip. If he gets both of them, then it's not against the loss. But if he doesn't, for whatever reason, if that rock in the 8 foot stays there, then now you throw another one top 8, and if he misses a double, you win the game.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the opportunities there to get both yellows here. I mean, it would be
It's hard
very
not to
thin,
get.
but
I don't.
yeah,
I think. Oh, I. Do you think it's there? I don't think it's there.
it'd be very thin. At the very least, I think if you're not dead jamming it, your red is probably spinning back to the center line, and
Oh, I
I
think
mean
you can
that's
make
even
a lot
questionable
of.
if you'd want that.
I think you can make a lot of good things happen with the red. I just don't
Yeah.
think you can get both yellows. I think you're trying to dead stuff this, and maybe leave yourself like an in off or something.
Hmm. This is curling, though.
Oh, that worked out pretty good, actually.
I don't- Maybe he could have gotten rid of both yellows if he
I
hits it.
mean,
He would have
yeah.
had to throw it a little bit harder, obviously, but
What did he threw? That was like control. If he
yeah.
hits it right there with Peel, they all go. I didn't think that was possible, but apparently it was.
And what's really good about it is he rolled his shooter out towards the wing, and now that's there's always a wide open path to the button, which is great. Obviously, Tanner's going to hit this, and in all likelihood, unless Tanner rolls really far, you'll probably see John throw the nose hit back, and at least that way he's not throwing something against a loss. But even if Tanner rolls far, John might hit the back one. Whatever he's comfortable with, really.
Yeah, it depends. I think if he can throw a hit, he's throwing a hit because you don't want to throw against the loss. But
Hmm.
I also think that if the hit is, like if Tanner makes this good, then the hit on the back one won't be shot rock. So
Hmm.
then you're going to see him play something for the win, I would think.
Tanner jumping up quickly. Did they
Oh
lose it?
boy. Yeah, I think it's picked or it's gone somehow.
Oof. Uh, I mean, gets quote unquote lucky enough, if you want to call it, to stick
Yeah,
around his shot, but it doesn't really make a difference. It's just a wide
no,
open hit now for the win.
it's really unlucky to have that pick something or whatever happened there.
An unfortunate, what would what will likely be an unfortunate ending to the weekend here for Team Horgan. A wide open hit here for John Epping. He's just going to throw it hard and make this yellow go away and move on to the semifinals. So final rock here in the eighth end. First playoffs for this Epping team this year, and looking to book their ticket one step further into the semifinal. Hard clean on it early. They seem to like it. And it will go, removes that stone, keeps the shooter. It's a score of 3 for John Epping here in the eighth end. He will take a 7-3 win. And Chelsea, maybe just some closing thoughts on what you saw here from Team Epping, or what was the turning point in the game here that was very close in the first half, but they were able to pull away.
Yeah, I feel like there was opportunities on both sides, and it just sort of like they unfortunately for Team Horgan, they missed a few more of those opportunities than Team Epping did. And so that's just how it shook out. And there was still like it was down to the wire. They had some chances in that last end to maybe make it hard on John Epping, and unfortunately it didn't quite come together. I mean, playing with three all of a sudden is a bit tough, and new teams and all that stuff. But a great game by Team Epping and a good battle, and that was fun to watch for me. I hope it was for everybody else. So yeah, it was a fun night, and I think tomorrow will be two really good games as well. There's the teams that are left are all powerhouses, so it should be fun.
Absolutely. And speaking of, John Epping moves on to the semifinal. He will face Yannick Schwaller in his game. The other last quarterfinal is still on. You can switch over to that uh, game on the other feed through the Curling Zone YouTube channel. From myself and from Chelsea, we'd like to thank everyone for inviting us into their homes or wherever you're watching from tonight. Come back tomorrow. We will still be covering every game as we work down towards the semifinals, which go off at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, noon Eastern. We invite you to come back, tune in then for some excellent matchups. But for now, good night. Thank you and good curling.